Welcome back. So this is number 12. So we're at the festival and we've just had the cleansing and the bell ritual is about to begin. So everyone who's not a witch has scuffled off down into the tents, and the participants, the people that are going to ring the bell, are down on the dance floor, and the witches have shot themselves off into the forest to wait. So Pagan, placing one hand in the trunk of the sitting tree, the moisture of the waterlogged bark reminded Pagan of past reincarnations. A tree's strength came from its age, knowledge that only time can teach. Alas, the same thing could not be said for witches. Only a few hundred meters away sat several hundred witches experiencing a cleansing ritual. The unnatural silence deafened her, and the smell of smoke reeked. Glad to have forfeited the purification for the sake of her nostrils, she took a moment to settle her nerves. Dante was a mere man, but he made her nervous. This was not a witch characteristic. Soon, Pan, the divinity of creatures and nature, who sprouted from the soil after Gaia fell into a deep sleep to protect his creator's skin, would arrive, bringing him with a contagious sexual prowess that would possess the chosen ritual bell participants. Pan would know she was waiting at the sitting tree. Pan saw everything in nature. Nature was his kingdom and one he ruled over. Straightening her dress, she sighed. The simple design of the dress contoured her body shape, highlighting her large hips, but she felt inadequate. A specially imported, express post from Spain, she had bought it over the internet after working 6 extra shifts to pay for it, and already she had ripped it while walking up the art track. The orange-red Duchess satin underlay complemented the chiffon top layer and the lace that covered her shoulders. Finishing in a high turtleneck, she looked like an 18th century vampire. The bottom of the dress was also lace, but now it was covered in mud. She'd wanted to be beautiful for him, and now her dress was ruined. Hearing a twig break and several large thumps, Pagan panicked, only to see a wallaby bounce away into the thick undergrowth. The sound of the flute enchanted her ears. Pan had arrived. Her heart raced and her eyes twinkled in the moonlight. Simultaneously, a chaotic orchestra of bells began, followed by movement. Can you imagine just thousands of bells going at the same time? Holding her hand high above her head, she animatedly yelled, "Loud, come and get me, Pan!" Screams followed by laughter echoed over the hillside as an explosion of sexuality ambushed the recipients of Pan's magic. Growing horns of all shapes and sizes from their foreheads and bushy mass of hair from their waist to their tips of their toes, the chosen men were released to hunt the witches. Pagan inhaled. She could smell him. Pan, through Dante, was racing up the hillside through the bush to fornicate with her. A strong gust of wind lifted her dress above her knees, and she frantically pushed the fabric back down as she wanted to look perfect for him. Like a surge of electricity, he arrived. You can just imagine the wind as if her hair stood on its end. Standing on the other side of the sitting tree, Dante teased her with a masculine sexuality. Pan's blood raged through his body. She sensed he was hesitating. Why? Peering around the sitting tree, Dante grinned back at her. His long black curly hair hung down over his well-shaped chest, and his large brown menacing eyes took her breath away. Lust intoxicated her. 12-centimeter horns, thick halfway and then likened to a pig's tail for the other half poked out of his forehead. Pan's magic had worked. Dante mentally undressed her with an intense stare. "Pretty frock, little witch. Pity it's coming off." He walked towards her and she stepped backwards. She wanted to play for a while. After all, it was a game. Even if it was one she wanted to lose. Stepping cautiously around each other like two lions about to pounce, their chemistry nurtured the other. A battle of wills had begun. Pagan felt alive. "Do you remember, Dante, what you said to me? That if you couldn't catch me, you would set me free? What a play." A deep growl passed his lips. She ran. Her bare feet swiftly galloped over the twigs and the damp ground. Closing her eyes, she embraced her witch intuition. Instinctively knowing where she was going, she forged ahead without fear. Dante had taught her new techniques to channel her witch ability 17 years ago when she was a maiden, and now, in irony, she was using it against him. Closing his eyes, Dante became a predator, Pan's magic rising through her body. He felt primal, eager to fornicate with her, be one with her, and own her. It was Pan's blood that made them equal. After all, a witch needs an equal. Accelerating up the hill, Pagan could smell the creek, which from her estimate was barely 10 meters away. She would have to jump in. She would have to jump it. Dante would be disappointed if she gave up so easily, and she was not about to disappoint him. Reaching the creek, she leapt. She opened her eyes and braced herself for the landing. Hovering for several meters, she landed clumsily onto the wet, muddy creek edge. Slipping, she fell forwards, landing on her hands and knees into the mud. Her dress caught under her knees. Dante caught her. Pagan retorted, "You're getting slow, old man." Dante arrogantly responded, "I wanted you to feel like you had a chance." Awkwardly, he flipped her dress up, exposing her bottom. Pulling her knickers down with one hand, he wrapped her long hair into a ponytail, forcing her head to bend backwards towards her shoulder blades. Adrenaline surged through her body. "Fuck me, Dante." Before she even finished saying his name, he stopped. Releasing his grip, he pulled her knickers back up. The elastic stung her waist. Standing, he left Pagan on her hands and knees. Pagan screamed from frustration, scaring a flock of birds that had not yet left for winter, now fleeing for safety. She stood up, her body raging with disappointment. Gathering her dress up, she walked towards him, slapping his cheek, which immediately welted and burned. He withstood the pain gallantly. "You don't do this to me, Dante, not to me. You fucked every woman you've ever met, and I'm not good enough for you? A witch isn't good enough for you? Do you know who I am?" Her words slapped his face, and a sadness compared to heartbreak quietened her. "Who I was?" He looked at her, swaying like a snake about to bite him. Dante responded honestly, "I'll never be yours, Pagan, with or without Pan's magic." Mud squished up through Pagan's toes and she swayed on the spot. "I'm under no illusion of what you have to offer me, Dante. No offense, I've been around for a long time. Love rarely comes into the equation. I just want you to fuck me. I mean, for fuck's sake, you have Pan's blood raging inside of you and you deny me?" Confident of her sexuality and effect on men, she added, "I think it's you questioning yourself. I think you're scared you might love me, Mr. Unavailable." Dante bit his lips. "I am what I am, Pagan." Ignoring him, she unzipped her dress, untied the corset, and pulled down her knickers, throwing them into a pile. Standing naked in front of him, her vulnerability questionable, she offered herself to him. "Look at me, Dante." Dante looked at her womanly body. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking for this moment. Moments are all I have." Softening her voice, she asked him to sit. Once he was, she lowered herself on his hairy lap. I'm just going to write that down, onto his hairy lap, kissed his welted cheeks and drank from his cut lip. His senses caved into lust, and Pan had nothing to do with it. Lifting her torso, she placed her right nipple into his mouth. She pushed his head back, kissing his forehead. The sweet flavour of his sweat seduced her taste buds. Grabbing at his long hair, she wrapped it fiercely around her hand and pulled. "How do you like it?" Dante laughed. Pushing her onto her back, he spread her legs apart with his knees, waiting for a second before entering her vagina. His hairy legs tickled her. Arching her breath shortened. Finally, after all these years, he was inside her. I want to put inside of her. Dante's breath lengthened as sparks of electricity pulsated throughout his body. Lost in the moment, in time and space inside of his little witch, and with each movement he fell deeper into a fleshy trance. He slowed and kissed her gently. Pagan opened her eyes. She placed her hand on his cheek. "I've wanted this for so long." Looking away, he plunged his teeth into her bicep, ripping at her flesh as if somehow he needed to punish her for how he was feeling. A good lover will make every woman feel as if he's in love with her, but somehow, perhaps because of Pan's magic, he felt a great connection to Pagan. He felt unprotected, vulnerable, and exposed. Pagan winced from the pain. Her toes tingled. Kissing him again, she tasted her own blood. Pulsating aggression roared throughout her body. He was about to ejaculate and she sensed it, which only increased her desire. Releasing her grip from him, she threw her head back and groaned. Her top lip trembled and her skin paled. The orgasm peaked and she ejaculated, her juices soaking his hairy groin. The orgasm froze time for several seconds and a deep primal growl left his lips, as if she were birthing her daughter. The energy released into the universe in one large explosion. He ejaculated fiercely into her vagina, hovering above her as if he were in pain. He collapsed as Pan's magic released from his body. Exhausted, he gathered his breath for several minutes, not as fit or virile as he once had been. They both lay still for a few moments, recording the elation into memory. In one big heave, Pagan pushed him off so she could lie beside him, finally registering the cold from the ground and the night air. As if she had remembered a joke, she laughed. "Why do you laugh, little witch?" "I don't know. Happy, I suppose." Moving to lay on top of him, she kissed his lips again, savouring the moment. Belated desire only increased her need to be with Dante, to kiss him, fuck him, or even to just speak to him. "There is something different about you, Dante. You're not like other men." So we're going to chapter 7, Pagan. So we're moving on from the festival. After roasting in the sun for 3 days and freezing for 2 icy nights, the combi started easily. Pagan sighed with relief. Although already suffering from withdrawals of drugs and alcohol and the lack of sleep, she thought the thought of packing and unpacking the combi depressed her. Also, the thought of returning to her mundane lifestyle positively reduced her to desolation. The long, windy road was congested. Pagan was relieved there was little traffic on the highway once they passed Deloraine. Sifting through Pagan's limited compact disc collection, Emily snarled, "You really need to buy an iPod, Pagan. Stop living in the past." Managing an annoyed nod, Pagan turned her attention back to the highway and Dante, who had simply vanished once the sun appeared. Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, played in the background as Pagan replayed their sexual encounter, which had been amazing and something she would like to repeat. They had missionary style sex, mundane missionary sex, but every cell in her body connected to his. She'd never felt a connection like this with another person, other than her soulmate. Ainley turned to the back seat to survey their sleeping companions. Faceline was asleep on Oscar's shoulders. Shallow snores vibrated his shoulder. She smiled at Oscar, who managed a half-hearted wink. At least Ruby was more relaxed, Emily thought as she watched her. After 45 minutes, they drove into Devonport, merging left into East Side. Pagan made another 2 turns left before entering Waterloo Road. Ruby lived on the edge of the city, with farmland directly behind her. The home was country-styled with the comforts of city living. Ruby had bought the house with her deceased husband's payout, and it represented a mixture of regret and new beginnings for Ruby. Except for the occasional lost dog visiting the backyard, Ruby lived there almost intruder-free. Pulling up to the curb, the combi rattled as it idled. Knowing better than to drive down the steep driveway, Pagan made sure that Ruby could easily step with the safety of the cement, avoiding the large dirt potholes that butted up against either side of the driveway. Gathering her bags, Ruby slipped out of the van. Eager to see Hensley and then head to bed for a few hours' rest, she said goodbye abruptly. Oscar, keen for home, slid the door shut while waving goodbye. After a tight U-turn, Pagan wound her window down to say another goodbye to Ruby. The cold wind refreshed her face. She inhaled, but before Pagan finished breathing in, she screamed. Faith Celine shuddered awake. Yanking the handbrake on, Pagan jumped out of the combi and raced across the road. For fuck's sake, Ruby, stop! Oscar, Emily and Faith Celine sat uncomfortably in the van. Reaching a hand out to Ruby, Pagan swung her around, but it was too late. The sound of the squeaking rope deafened Ruby. Frozen, she stood staring at Hensley's dead body hanging from the treehouse by a towing rope. The smell of Hensley's decomposing body reeked up Pagan's nostrils, causing her to vomit, painting the paved driveway with drug and alcohol composition of yellow, brown and black. It's a bit yucky, isn't it? A heavy late afternoon rainfall left the bush track sludgy. Stepping out of the car, Pagan removed her shoes, throwing them onto the front passenger seat of the car. It made no sense to dirty a pair of clean shoes when she was only walking 100 metres into the bush. Sitting in the car for an hour prior, the image of Hensley's corpse swinging from the rope had rotated through her thoughts many times. Saturated from built-up emotion, Pagan feared she was about to suffer from another bout of depression. She had a dam full of tears to release, but found not a single tear to shed. Relieved to see headlights winding through the entrance into the car park, she slid down into the seat, hiding from Henry, who parked his expensive four-wheel drive that his mummy had brought him for his birthday on the opposite side of the car park. He hopped out of the vehicle, pressing the lock button on the car's remote. Watching him walk into the bush alone made her feel guilty that she had hidden from him, but it was best that she always had the upper hand, as he was a young adult with a large ego and money to support it. Following Henry 5 minutes later, she left the car unlocked and walked into the Don Reserve. It was a moonless night and the bush much darker than usual. Dry mud cushioned her footsteps and the occasional tree branch massaged her hardened soles. Stream rising from the warming ground hid her ankles and concealed the bush track. She appeared to be gliding effortlessly through the bush. Among the trees, Pagan felt at home and politely said hello to Pan. Heightened smell guided her to Henry, who stood in the clearing where they had met on several occasions before. His pheromones were already releasing. Squinting, Pagan could barely see him, but she confidently walked towards him. Sensing his anticipation, she stopped a metre in front of him. He needed to remember boundaries. No need for introductions, Pagan spoke. Henry, I need you not to touch me, understand? No need. Stupidly, he stepped forwards. He stepped towards Pagan, who stepped instantly backwards to keep a physical void between them. I mean it, Henry. I can't explain it, but I don't want you, but I just need you tonight. Do you get that? Confused, he bluffed his way through. I'm at your mercy, Pagan. Frustrated with his lack of understanding, she thought about returning to the car, but knew she had to have an emotional release by not releasing an emotion at all. I need to fuck you, but it's not you I'm fucking. Arrogantly, he replied, yeah, I get it. No, you don't get it. Moving closer to him, she whispered into his ear, warming his neck with her breath. She would need to be cruel to him. You're nothing but a piece of meat to me, Henry. You're just a vibrator with a pulse. Nothing about this is about you. Don't move, don't talk, don't touch, and most importantly, don't think. That shouldn't be so hard. A little wounded by her unkind words, Henry nervously agreed. Anxious to start, she removed his loose shorts and underwear over his sneakers. Leaving his jumper on, Pagan stepped backwards and stared at the young man. She was about to objectify an 18-year-old boy, a sexual tool for her own wretched needs, and he was enabling her to do it. Passively, he followed her instructions by lying down on the cold grass with only his legs and groin exposed, and his dignity disposed. Already removing her underwear before she left home, Pagan lifted her cotton skirt above her knees. Lowering her vagina onto his hardening penis, she wriggled on top of him. Her body responded to his 7 inches. Stiffening, he lifted his groin so he could enter her deeply. He reached out to touch her and she pushed his hands away. Rejecting any possibility of intimacy, she grabbed his shorts and threw them over his face. She moved her knees, sitting on him as if she was sitting upon a chair. Her toes gripped the grass as she moved unemotionally upon him. Wiping all thoughts of Dante from her mind, she moved jarringly on top of Henry. His breathing hollowed. Arching backwards, she placed her palms beside her on Henry's inner thighs. Fingernails pierced his skin, but obediently Henry remained still. The force of her aggression moved them along the grass. He had never witnessed Pagan like this. It turned him on to be treated like a sexual object. Whatever had happened to her since he had last seen her, he was thankful for. Pagan searched desperately for a reconnection with her inner self. Failing to find any part of her existence she was happy with, she physically rotated on Henry facing his feet. Stupidly, his fingertips touched the back of her jumper. No! She let images of Dante enter her imagination. Instantly, a warm, tingling sensation entered her chest. Responding quickly to the sexual rush, she pulled her jumper off to expose her naked upper body. Sexually fit, Pagan accelerated her movement. Henry was fatiguing underneath her, but she ignored him and continued. Struggling not to ejaculate, Henry concentrated on his 12 mathematic equation that sat on his desk at home. His college math teacher would be proud of him. If he ejaculated, Pagan would kill him. The sudden smell of decay interrupted Pagan mid-movement. She opened her eyes to scan the clearing. She saw nothing moving in the bushes in front of her. Seconds later, a slow-moving, murky green apparition floated through the trees, but vanished before Pagan's eyes adjusted to the image. She jumped up, preparing for the worst. Something supernatural was lurking in the bushes, watching them. Seconds later, the murky green apparition reappeared, flying at tremendous speeds towards them. Pagan firmly pushed her palms out, protecting her body from the impact, a habit wanting to release her magic from her palms. It had disappeared only inches from Pagan's hands. Sniffing the air, she relaxed. The entity had gone, and so had her orgasm. Remembering Henry, she looked down at him. Dutifully, he had remained still, his shorts still covering his face and his penis still hard. For fuck's sake, Henry, put your pants back on and go home. I'm going to finish that up because that's our first third done. So, and then we start part 2. So that's our part 1 is just finished there. So with part 2, we're actually going back in time to Pagan's childhood. And then we see why she's so fucked up. Why she's so fucked up. So you get to see why she can't find happiness in anything that she's doing. It's just gut-wrenching, really, to see someone in so much despair and just creating more toxicity above more toxicity to find some meaning. And she's so heading in the wrong direction to where she would ever find that meaning. So I'll finish it there. Just trying to think of something that I might want to talk about with you. But once again, I'm not feeling like I really need to talk about much. I mean, it's very explicit. There's a lot of sexual stuff going on in those like today's and yesterday's. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. So probably cutting off today's a little bit earlier gives you some time to brace yourself for part 2. Thank you.